Hello, and welcome again to Let's Make a Game. We're building a game called Off and On Again, and this is episode 6. Each episode is an hour long, and the project is a 25-hour budget. So this is much about the technical aspect and the technical challenges of building a game as it is about the organizational and scoping issues around software development and game development specifically. So we're 1/5 of the way through our project. We've built a prototype of the game. We've done a little bit of concept art for an aesthetic feel about what the final art it may look like, though we haven't begun creating that. We had some sessions that went well, and we had some that ran into problems and took a little bit longer. And at this point, 1/5 of the way into the project, it's definitely time to take a look at what we have and reestablish a roadmap of where we need to go. So first, we'll recap the last 5 episodes very quickly. So in the first episode, we did basic project setup, and we prototyped the very basic gameplay mechanic. We sketched out a few ideas for different types of interactions, and planned out what we do in session 2, where we did a little bit of bug fixing from the first session, created empty title and credit scenes just to try to create some end caps in the project. We implemented 3 different tile types in the game itself, and also implemented endgame detection so the game can tell when you've solved a puzzle. In episode 3, we implemented level saving and level loading, which is used in the editor that was built in as a sort of debug mode currently, and also added support then to that level saving and loading for not just the state of the board but the different tile types. And we have that now saving our levels into our code base through the editor. In session 4, we built a level selector screen, and in level 5, we just clean up about some bugs that were broken with game manager changes that we made and hooked up that new level selector to the overall flow of the game. And as part of this recap, we're going to take a quick look at what the game currently looks like and how it currently behaves. So we're going to start out at the title screen, which is where the game will start. And we're going to try out the game, and we're going to walk through the entire process. We do one level. So the game starts, and we will hit our play. And once we see what the current state of the game is, then we'll take that step back and sort of look at a overall picture of where we need to go from here and what's missing, what we expect we need to do. Maybe try to break things up into a few categories like musts and shoulds and mights so that we can kind of prioritize the tasks that we need to take on. Because we're definitely going to have more to do than we're currently sure that we can do in the length of the project. We may be able to get everything we can think of done, but we don't yet know how everything's going to go. So we need to have a little bit of prioritization in place so that we're completing the things that absolutely must be getting in the final game first, and leave the things that are more optional for towards the end when there is extra time, if there is. So here is the current prototype, the title screen, the level select, moving to the gameplay scene and the loading of the selected level, completing the level, and going back to the title, or to the level select, to another level, and if we quit, we'll go to a simple credit screen and back to the title. So that is the full flow, that is the current state of the game, and I think it's a pretty good start as terms of a prototype. And now we'll look at what do we definitely need so far. So we also, last session, did a bit of sketching, and we focused here on a few things. Aesthetically, what do we think these buttons will look like? Very vaguely, what's this style going to be? How are we going to construct our sprites that we'll create for the button pushing animations we'll have. So sort of like what different assets will we create. We played around with a couple options for how the type symbols will work. And I think that we kind of settled on this more simple form than one that shows the individual lights. Just quick sketch about a sort of inspiration of like an old-timey, some sort of computer calculator device that this would sort of be styled as. But we don't want that much of a literal physical look, so the eventual style will be a little bit different. We talked a little about what a logo might look like and sketched out a basic layout of that, which at a later point we'll try to put together. And of course, all of this, sketching out these ideas, creating all this art and the sprites, putting those together, creating a logo, and then styling things like that title screen that the logo will go on, the credit screen. All this is things that are going to take up time out of our 25-hour budget that is not going to writing code. So game development is a lot more than putting letters together to make code and writing that game. So it takes a lot more skill sets that all need to be combined. It's a very mixed medium. So currently in our list of free tasks here, which are things we have not yet assigned to a given session, are a few things that we listed earlier on. Eventually, a high score screen that will record your scores. Potentially, I'm not really sure how scoring will work in the game, so I'm not sure whether or not that's going to be added yet, to be honest. I have a plan for making a checklist of posting and publicizing these particular recordings because part of my budget has to include the time to actually do this. For the actual game that we're sure we're going to do, we do have the need to create a number of art assets based on some of that concept art. So that means doing a full and final version of a title and logo. It means creating the different versions of the button sprites, the final version of the symbols for the different button types, a logo / splash screen for sort of the one-man studio name that I operate under, which is Stonebird Games, and any sort of framework around the game buttons itself. So the pieces, the framing around the puzzle. But this was an early list of tasks that I expected, and now we've gotten a number of things under our belt from what we've accomplished already. And I think it's time to sort of sit down and think, what else can we consider is definitely needed? And so I'm going to just start trying to come up with as many things that I can think of now that may need to get done. So we put the level selection screen, but we do need levels locked until previous level is completed. So this allows for essentially when you start the game, you only play level 1, and then level 2, level 3, enforcing that progression. Many more tasks, and I should be able to think of them quicker, but of course on the spot that's a little hard. So this is a big part of the process, though, is not just doing the work, but trying to figure out what the work is. We need to make some consideration for are we going to include sound effects or a soundtrack, and that's probably going to mean looking for some freeware, or not freeware, but some freely licensed sound effects and music that may be available somewhere that we could use directly, or possibly that we could do some very light processing on to get matching the feel that we need. We are going to put this on Android on the Google Play Store, so we need to register the game on Google Play and do all of the various setup. There's a lot of steps required for getting an app up onto the Play Store, so that's a piece that we're going to need. To do that, we'll need to make sure that we have a working Android build, so we're going to test Android build at some point of whatever the current state is to make sure that that works correctly to get through the Play Store. So we have this editing mode down here. Which we want to make sure is disabled when we're not running in a developer mode. Right now, you can only get to the credit screen from quitting in-game, and we want to make sure we can quit from level select to get to the credits as well. Right now, all of the interactions are free of any animation, and I think that the game would feel a lot better if we can do some very basic transitions. For example, a really quick fade of the light turning on and off whenever we toggle them. Perhaps some sort of effect whenever when you interact, the button you interact with turns the lights on and off around it, like maybe some kind of burst or so, some sort of just a little pattern, just to create a less static feel. That's something that we're definitely going to look into. That's going to take probably an entire session, because it's both the planning and the tweaking of just getting that feel just right. And so we're going to have to plan for that being a little more extensive. We should list today as, or what we're doing right now as a goal here. So alright, so we do need to consider how these tasks are being distributed or prioritized and split up. So we're going to group these into musts, shoulds, and mights. And no, we're going to start moving these things among there. And I'm going to say that the high score screen is a might, because I'm not even positive about there being a scoring system necessarily. It's more likely to just be the puzzles. I think this is something I'm going to do outside of the recording, because it's more a meta sort of task. All these art assets are definitely required, so I'm going to put those under must, as well as registering on Google Play, because if we complete this but we haven't been able to share it, that's not really worth our time. We should consider sound effects and soundtrack, but honestly, as a puzzle game, if we miss that, it's not the end of the world. These two are kind of high on the should list, but are definitely, just in practical terms, not something that would break the game by not being completed. So for our current prioritization needs, we're going to keep those under should. Alright, so another thing that I know is going to be a must is creation of 25 levels, which is the current level selection screen. But there is also a should, which is support for more than 25 levels in the level select, and creation of 50 or more levels. So could add some sort of pagination, being able to go to different sets of levels. And if we do this, though, it's going to need to be multiples of 25, just because of the way the interface works out and the consistency that brings. I think most likely it'll be maybe an easy and hard set, and possibly 3 sets if we have time. As a matter of fact, I'll split that up into 2 different sets of an additional 25 levels. All right. And hopefully we get time to do that if the rest of the game implementation and design goes well, if the first 25 levels, if designing those goes smoothly. And of course, the more levels we create, the more balancing there's required for the progression of those. So it's not necessarily a linear increase in effort. So I don't think that we'll be able to do more than that, and I think that if we get to the 50, that would be great, and it'd be plenty. And if we don't get to additional ones, it would still probably be fine, at least as an initial release, and we could add more after that. All right, so I think that, as I said numerous times throughout this process, I'm sure more things will come up. That's sort of why there's a focus in this process on constant planning and adjustment. But right now, I think this is a good fleshing out of additional effort that's needed from right now. I'm also considering that we have completed 1/5 of the process, and so we now have 80% of our time left, and we need to watch as that time counts down and plan accordingly. So for example, the time we did so far creating this prototype covers then the next 5 sessions, including this one. So we can kind of use that as a gauge. What did we do in that set of time, and what can we do in the same amount of time moving forward? And I think that there are a couple more things here I do want to include, which is the title and credit screens. Definitely placeholder right now, and we need to get those completed. And we'll probably get to this after our assets, so we're going to move that down. So let's see, we now have, after a little bit of planning here, we've got 40 minutes left on the clock for today, and we do want to get some actual tasks done, not just the planning. So we're going to work on some of these high priority things, especially making sure we're going to have a mix of planning and art and code in each session if possible. So we're going to start with this editing scene down here, or editing tools, and make sure these are not actually available unless you're running in the developer mode. So when we run in debug mode through the editor, there's a flag that Unity makes available to us, and we'll use that to determine whether or not that level editing is active or not. And we're going to do that through the level editor itself, or its script. So we're going to move over here to the level editor component in Visual Studio. And we're essentially just going to check so only when we're running within the Unity editor, or rather when we're not running within the Unity editor, we'll just turn off the editor component. Now we can test this out by reversing the condition so that we will disable it when the Unity editor is actually in use. The other way to test it would be to do a full build out of the editor in order to test this flag, which I think is a little more effort or time than we need to spend just at this moment. So we should see this editor interface disable itself. And that worked great. And then we'll move on to our third task for the session, which is an improvement to our level selection screen so that, let's take a look at that level selection screen so we can see what we're going to do. Alright, so we're going to go over to that. Sometimes the Unity code reloading, which is a very handy feature, often breaks. So it's not always as helpful or fruitful as hoped for. That's what happened there. Is reloading the code during the runtime actually just did not work, broke the game. And because of that, I very rarely actually use that feature. Alright, so in the level editor, right now, all 25 level buttons are available to us immediately, but what makes more sense for the progression of a game is to essentially disable all but the first, and then to unlock each of them in progress. And that requires a few different steps, which we will itemize before we begin. First of all, to do this, we need a mechanism to lock and unlock the level buttons. So they need some property or method that triggers and toggles this behavior. We'll also need to track the last level completed. We'll also need a sort of little lock icon, I think, on those buttons, although that's just part of the mechanism right now, and honestly we're not going to do whatever the final art will be, so there's not a need really for that. So I think the first thing that we actually want is to track the levels that are completed. I think that's going to be the way we want to go about this. And this is going to be part of the, I believe this will be part of the level loader, or we'll try to figure this out. What component makes the most sense to handle this behavior? think the game manager should probably be responsible for at least a bit of this. And before we go and add anything else, we might want to find if there's something it's already doing that we can hook into. Alright, so right now we have a method that's invoked on the game manager, current level complete, when the board is cleared and the player has completed the puzzle. And I think if we look at where that's currently invoked from, which is within the grid itself, we'll see that is done at the end of each level. And when this happens, we should know what the current level is and be able to record it. So I think we'll add that here, or rather when the level's completed. Unity comes with a simple system for storing very basic data about the current player, player prefs. It can be used for simple settings and also be used even for level save data whenever it's very simple and compact. And that's what we use here. So first thing we'll need to do when recording a completed level is see if we've already recorded one. But before we do that, we're going to want to know what does that data look like. So we'll default to 0 when they haven't even completed the first level, of course. We only want to update the recorded level if the new one is larger. And just for testing purposes, we'll go ahead and have Unity log each level as we complete them. Now make sure that we're tracking the correct one, especially that if we, for example, complete level 2 and then go back and redo level 1, that we're not overriding our game save. Alright, and we currently have the level select screen open, which is exactly what we want, so we can navigate between these levels while we watch the level save do its thing. So initiate this scene and keep an eye on the console as we play. We'll clear that so we can see a little better. Alright, looks like we were already logging which level we were loading, so we should see that number twice when we enter it and when we solve it. So here we have recorded beating level 1. I think if we go back in there and do it again, we're not going to see that we've logged again, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want, but we will see if we come in here. And there we are, entering the level and then saving the level. Alright. And now that we are recording our progress properly, we can use that information inside of the level loader. So when we're displaying the level buttons, we're just going to want to get from the game manager what was the last level that the user completed and disable the buttons for which that level is greater. So if they've completed level 2, we actually want to disable everything above level 3, which is one more. So we'll do that after we initialize the buttons. Alright, and we completed 2 levels in our little test there. So if this works, we should see up to level 3 available to play. Alright, we'll try this out, and we should be able to see when the buttons are disabled and know that this works correctly. Right. When this comes up, looks like we got this logic backwards. We've disabled the ones that we've completed and not the ones that haven't. That's backwards. So we're going to try that out again. Alright, let's take a look and see if that was just a simple flip that we needed. Alright, so we completed level 1 and 2, we recorded that and disabled everything above one more, so that's all of these. If we go and play level 3 now, assuming that I can remember how to solve my own puzzle, here we go. Alright, and now we have a new level available, although we haven't actually created 4 levels yet, so we wouldn't be able to load that. Now the level selection progression is in place. Alright, so we tracked the last level that we've completed so that we could implement a mechanism to lock and unlock the level buttons as needed. And I will call that complete as soon as it is committed. However, I'm not going to immediately call that complete and only say that because we do need a way of changing that value for the purposes of editing. So for example, when we're testing the game, we need to be able to unlock ones that we haven't actually gotten to yet, or we also need to be able to reset it for testing purposes. And so I don't think we want to call this complete until we've added that kind of support for what we need as developers. All right. Now, thinking of the best way to do this, I think the main thing that we want is a way to reset it. And that's not something that we need in the game. It is something that we need available perhaps through the editor. So that's what I want to go and look at. And though I've done this a bunch of times before, I never remember the exact way that you add a simple button to the inspector, but that's basically what we're going to do. So we'll take a look at that quick and add a simple button to our level selection component so that in the editor itself we have a way of adding this. Right, I'm not going to watch a video because I think that's a little redundant in this context. As a matter of fact, all we really need is just a quick, simple example, which acts as a refresher. So the way we do this is registering an editor subclass that will create an editor helper. We connect this to the component that it will be used for in the inspector. Remember what the preference was called, last level. So we'll hook that button up to just reset that back to 0, assuming that we got that all correct. We also, before forgetting, we only want this to exist when compiled for the Unity editor. Later, when we actually do the final build, if we have left these sort of editor customizations in place without a precompiler check for the Unity editor being present, this won't work in runtime because the Unity editor package is completely missing whenever we're not in the editor. So we'll also put that condition on importing that, like so. Now, since we're doing this in the editor now, everything should still work. So now we should see if we can hit reset, start the game, and we're back at the beginning, which will let us just test the progression in a normal way. All right. So we'll commit that addition. We'll mark that off, consider this complete, and update our notes for what we've accomplished so far. Alright, now we did already complete this editing mode disable for normal builds, so that users can't load and save level edits. But one thing we forgot is that the controls that we added are still going to be allowing those to be used. So and let me show you what that means. So back here in our gameplay scene, which we'll get right over to, in order to edit levels and get the layout exactly as we want, it's not just playing it and then assuming the user's going to play backwards to reverse it. What you can't see except on the screen is I can hold down numpad buttons 1 and 2 to toggle specific pieces like this. And I use this as our level editor. I can also create these special pieces like this, toggling the type. And those are the features that we don't want available to people playing the game normally. And these are implemented as part of the grid cell controller right here. So both of these conditions are essentially what is triggered whenever the tile is clicked on, but if it's clicked on while one of these buttons is held down, then this special debug behavior happens instead. And that's the part that we want to get rid of. So we're going to basically make this whole if-else chain for the debug mode conditional on being within the editor. And we will put the start of this if condition in here, and we're also going to want to make sure the closing tag is conditional as well. It's a little confusing to have conditions for our conditionals, but that's the nature of compile time condition flags. And what we should see is that this continues to work right now, so we'll go ahead and test that out. We are in the editor, so we should still have these features available. All right. And then to test what this is going to do when we're running out of the editor, we'll just reverse that. You should now see how only the normal behavior is active. So now whenever we rerun this, we should be unable to toggle single tiles or to change their types. And while this is planned to be released as a small mobile game on Android, we do have to consider that people can even hook up a keyboard to that, and then later we might decide to do a PC release on itch.io or something, and we should make sure that we've already checked off all the needed protections from this editor mode. Alright, so I am holding down numpad 1, which should toggle one tile if editor mode was still available, and it is not. Holding down numpad 2 as well does not work anymore. So we'll undo that testing change. Commit this. Now we can consider that complete. Disabled tile or disabled single tile toggle and type swapping. And we have about 12 minutes left, and something just popped in my head as I was testing those features out, that I I think there is one more type of tile that I want to experiment with adding. And that is a disabled type. We have types now that do the normal cross toggle, that toggle an entire row, column, or surrounding square. But what I think would be another interesting interaction type is one that can't be interacted with. So one that can only be toggled by neighbors, but that you can't directly interact with. We're going to call that a blocked type. And the defining factor of this is that clicking on it will be essentially a no-op. It will complete nothing. Right. We are going to need to create a really quick sprite for this. Just bear with me for a second. And I don't know how this will fit into the other symbols style-wise, because it's not expressing the shape that will be interacted with, but that no interaction can happen. So I think we definitely want to make sure that it is distinguished a bit from the others. But I think for the moment, we're going to signify that with a really simple, just essentially blackout sort of thing. And now that we've added that sprite, we're going to want to add that to the set of type sprites that are maintained in the game manager in an array. That's through the prefab, and that's where toggling the buttons where they get the sprites from to know how to display their own type. So we'll go in here and add that. And then we're going to go ahead and try that out. We do want to make sure. So right now we are toggling through 5 types, and what we really want now is 5 or 4. Now we want 5. So let's try that out. And we'll try creating a simple little map that has some disabled elements. So here we can go through row, column, square, and now disabled. I think that looks sufficiently distinguished from the rest. And now, as expected, you cannot interact with it. And now we'd want to find what is a reasonable solution to this puzzle. And Not sure how this piece is going to get used just yet, but I'm definitely happy with it as an addition to the rest. So I'm going to keep that. We missed a few things in previous commits, so oops, see, that's unfortunate. I wish it didn't happen so much. All right. I will say that my commits for team projects are a lot more standalone, modular, and a lot more precise. I hope. Definitely feels less pressure to get those as clean as possible for personal projects. Going back in the history isn't nearly as common. So the main reason that I'm using Git for a personal project, especially for a game development project, is to roll back to usually to the last version, and never really beyond that. So log messages, we want to make sure that we know what we were doing, but a lot of detail doesn't ever help me, at least not yet. And maybe that's something I should be better at, but just yet I'm not. All right, so we'll add that new block type to our session nodes. And in the last few minutes here, I think we will plan out a little bit about what the next session, session 7, will be. All right. I think one thing we're going to do is get this Google Play set up, done, and test an Android build. And the reason that we want to do this essentially earlier is it's a kind of boilerplate thing around the development of the game that is really easy to keep pushing off and pushing off and pushing off. And then you have all this extra sort of tedious bookworking to do at the end. And getting that stuff out of the way means you can focus the end of the process on just finishing the game. So we want to get that out of the way early, and that is the main thing that we're going to plan for that next session. And I hope that it leaves time for something else. But if it doesn't, we are going to get started on art assets after that, starting with the title, buttons, and final symbols. And we're going to start planning out these sessions a little further, both for planning purposes, but also so we can kind of see how much do our plans need to shift. If we're only ever planning for one more session, we're not really getting a picture of if our planning is correct. Not really sure how to move this or how to plan for this level creation task, because it's not just one task, it's the 25 individual tasks and the balancing of those levels. So I'm going to think about that a little bit before figuring out how to add it into our timeline. But in the interest of finishing up some of those things that seem less important but keep getting pushed off, we don't want to not be able to launch a game because we didn't finish the credit screen. So we'll add that to session 9 along with an updated title screen using the title that we'll create in session 8, as long as all of these things go well. Our list of free tasks continues to shift down along with the schedule. So here we have planned out the next 3 sessions, 7 through 9, which leaves one more session in the second fifth of our progress. Of course, before this episode, we have finished the first fifth, so it's a good chunk to think about, the 20% of our budget. So this gives us a clear path for this second 1/5 of the process, and a little bit of wiggle room by leaving the last hour unplanned so far. And I think that these are kind of our goals, is getting new art assets in place, both for the gameplay itself and also the sort of caps. And when we have that, we're going to have a much different look and feel of this game, and we're going to have it working on an actual phone. We're going to have it installable for beta testers through the Play Store, and all of those things. Even if we still only have those 3 levels completed, even if we still have exactly the same interactions, is going to be a world of difference. So that is going to make a big push from the prototype to the final game. It's going to be very exciting, but quick change in the short 3 hours, if all those things can get done. And if it shifts to the 10th session and it takes 4, that will be fine, and it'll leave the next 15 for not a lot of things to do. We definitely, I think, are going to get a lot of these should items completed, and we're certainly going to come up with more things that we haven't thought of yet. But right now, our list of things to do is looking really great. So, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and there should be another tomorrow where we will get a little bit set up on Google Play and look into Android testing. I hope you look forward to it. I know I do. Have a great day.